Hi, everyone. This is Leo Alvarenga with the Realestating Co. We're here for the Realestating's podcast, episode 4. We have a special guest today, Mitchell Leitman at RSR Law. The reason Mitch is here with us today over Zoom is because there has been more news coming out of Toronto of people fraudulently selling homes when they're not even owning them. So Mitch is going to break down a few things for us, give us some information, how to protect ourselves, how to protect our sellers, our buyers, and the public in general. So thank you for tuning in. Mitch, thank you so much for being here with us today. Welcome, Mitch. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. So,
Thank you for having me.
so tell us a little bit, Mitch. I mean, we're reading the headlines, of course, but tell us a little bit of what's happened there in Toronto.
Sure. So, well, it appears that there's been a couple cases now, and according to reports, they may be connected to one another. And what it appears has happened is there has been some uh, ID forgery, where there's been impersonation of owners of property, and the impersonators purported to sell property in the name of the rightful owner, with the view to receiving money, whether it be, excuse me, through, I think the first case was money through the mortgage, and the second one on a sale. So that's two common, well, I say common hypothetically, traditionally, and unfortunately recently common in the news, ways of committing fraud with respect to property value and extracting the equity that's available in the property. Um, and there are steps that can be taken to try to reduce that risk of that happening. Uh, we know that in the second case that was reported, it was caught. I'm not sure if it was just fortuitous, or there was something that flagged someone and therefore it brought to someone's attention. But there are things that can be done to try to reduce the risk of being exposed to this kind of fraud.
Okay, yeah, and I think what at least what we've been reading in some of the articles is it's happened in the past where, like you mentioned, like someone will take out, will refinance a home, pretending to be the owner of the home, and pull out equity out of it like that, but actually selling the home and going through the whole process and pretty much fooling the agents, the mortgage broker, and actual lawyers. That's where it kind of takes it to the next level. And perhaps you can walk us through. I mean, first of all, how can a buyer be protected in this case?
Okay. I mean, you are a bit at the mercy of the sophistication of the criminal that's committing this fraud. So the way it can be most commonly affected, this fraud, is they have control of the property physically as well. It's not merely impersonating the person, but say they're the tenant, or an extended Airbnb occupant of a premises, so that when appraisers come by, when realtors come by for showings, they have control and they have access. They control the access into the home, and so what you can do to try to reduce the risk on the buyer side would be, I suppose, verifying who the owners are. Now, there are ID verification tools out there, software platforms, web-based, that allow you to verify ID, but that does require cooperation of the person on the other side, right? They have to provide their ID for verification. And that also presupposes that you're going to interact directly with the other side. So in this case, the fraudulent seller. That's harder for a buyer because the buyer is going to have an agent representing them most typically, and the agent representing them is also not going to be dealing with the seller directly because the seller is going to have their own agent, presumably, if they're putting it through the MLS. And so it's very hard to verify the identity because you can't actually see the person face to face to compare it against ID. So it's a matter of those ID verification tools do allow you to not just check the photo, but also will check things against a credit history, against the address, things like that, to try to see if there's other flags of fraud that might be out there. And so that's one thing you can do. But it's honestly, It is very difficult. A sophisticated criminal that wants to pull the wool over everyone's eyes. A buyer is someone who's, a few steps removed. So there are things that we can do to try to mitigate against that. The most common thing is title insurance. Title insurance is insurance that is guaranteeing, amongst other things, that you are not a victim of fraud. Uh, there is there's also an assurance fund maintained by the province for those who have been deprived of title. So say you buy a property and you are a victim of fraud. So the person who sold it to you is not the rightful owner.
Okay.
If the rightful owner comes out of the woodwork, say they come back from a 6 month sabbatical, or in the case that was recently in the news, say it happened after closing that the niece found out that her uncle's house had been sold out from under them. There are steps that they can do to recover the property, and then the person who purchased the property and is a victim, innocent victim, may have recourse to this assurance fund. This is run by the government. There's like an adjudication procedure, much like having a court hearing, to test whether you have a legitimate claim to that fund. Title insurance makes it much simpler, to be quite honest,
Okay.
because title insurance exists. It's a policy for your own benefit as the policyholder, and it is a policy that exists with no deductible. There's no adjudication process like a hearing. There's an underwriting and an adjusting process, just like any other insurance, but it is a simpler process meant to be easier to navigate.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So title insurance would protect you. So just to kind of summarize what you mentioned, what you said
Yeah.
right now. So pretty much,
Mhm.
if you have title insurance, say I'm the buyer of the home. John Doe is selling it to me, and he's a fraudulent seller. I have, you're my lawyer. You sell me, you include title insurance in the purchase. We find out 3 months later that the seller was not the seller, that we have to give title back to the rightful owner. I guess that's what would happen. But title insurance would cover and protect us from any any money that we spent in this transaction, and also any appreciation as well on the
That's
transaction.
right. Yeah. So at least the insurance that we most often work with, the company we work with most often, has what they call inflation coverage. So they will protect you for up to 2 times what you've paid. So if
Oh
your home
wow.
has gone up in value from the time you bought it, so the time you entered into the agreement of purchase and sale, until the time you find out you're not the actual owner, they will cover you for up to 100% increase in the value of the
Oh wow.
property.
Okay, well that's
Yeah.
really important, especially
Hmm.
in the market that we were in, right?
Right. Right.
If these individuals, I mean, they bought it. I think it was at the beginning of 2020. 2020, so one was in 2021, one is in 2022, the beginning, or both at the beginning of 2022. In the market like that, prices went up, skyrocketed, right, in a matter
Yeah.
of months. So I think that's a great option. What
Hmm.
about if you're on the selling side? Like, what if you're the seller? What if I'm on vacation? Someone,
Hmm.
my tenant, a fraudulent tenant comes in, they sell the house. What kind of protection does the seller have? Like, what can I do to
Right.
protect myself as an owner of the home?
Again, there's that recourse to the land titles assurance fund. That's always an option that's available to you. But also title insurance. uh, it's not a panacea, it's not a cure-all, but it does exist both for the benefit of a buyer, but also a seller who took out title insurance, say when they bought the property,
Oh, okay.
or even if they bought a property and they didn't get title insurance, which I will say in the last couple of decades is extremely rare in Ontario. In most cases, you'll have a policy of title insurance. But if
Okay.
you don't have a policy of title insurance, say you bought it a long time ago before title insurance was really a thing,
Yeah,
or say you inherit, yeah, an elderly
like an
person
elderly
who got
person
the right,
50 years
right,
ago, right? Yeah.
right, or say you inherit the property, so you never actually bought it, you inherit it from an uncle or a parent or something.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
Uh, and so you didn't get title insurance when you acquired it then. You can still get what's called an existing homeowner policy, which gives coverage for this very same thing as well. So, as
Okay.
an owner of the property, your title insurance would cover you if you become a victim of fraud. And so
Okay.
most things title insurance covers you for are for things that happen before you're the owner. So,
Okay.
making sure that the, necessary building permits are taken out to build the house or to build an addition or something like that, or anything like that. So they cover you for things up until the time you're the owner. But with fraud protection, they actually cover you both before
Afterwards
you're the owner
and
and after.
afterwards. Oh
Exactly,
wow, that's
exactly.
fantastic. That's fantastic. So
Yeah.
I think that would be I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, we've
Yeah.
title insurance is
I
kind of it's not a cure-all like you said, but
no,
it's a
but it's
no-brainer. Yeah.
something that's, yeah, and also it's funny. I've always explain this to clients every time I meet with them. I explain about the fraud protection and how that's a benefit. And unfortunately, up until now, or I guess fortunately, up until now, it's been a hypothetical. We talk about, if this were to occur, here's what the coverage would be.
Yes.
There had been cases previously reported to my recollection out west during the oil boom, like the last oil boom, where there's a lot of absentee landlords owning homes and renting them
Yes.
out to relatively transient workers, for instance,
Of
where there was
course.
some exposure to some liability there. And so that's where we did see some claims experience, and that's the examples I would cite. Of course, now unfortunately we can cite some Ontario examples, nothing to my knowledge in Ottawa yet.
Yet.
Um, but well, yeah, it might only be a matter of time
Yes.
um, before we do see it. If they think that we're easy targets in Ottawa, if they feel that there's been more vigilance in Toronto in reaction, maybe the criminals will turn to other markets. So, as I say, I've always explained that benefit of title insurance,
Yeah.
and now more than ever, I think it's very beneficial.
No, that's fantastic. That's really good. And I guess, I mean, especially for, I mean, like you said, like for the last couple of decades, it's rare for a buyer not to have title insurance. But my message would be for, if you have a elderly family that has owned the property for 40,
Hmm.
50, 60 years, original owners in my neighborhood alone, there's at least a handful or 10 of them. It'd be good to do some due diligence with their real estate lawyers, and to make sure that that protection is in place. It could save you a lot of headache and money as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah,
Um,
and it's worth mentioning as well. Title insurance, in terms of cost, it depends on the premium value of the property, because the premium is based on the risk of a claim, in terms of the exposure for the amount of a payout. Uh, but the premiums are usually in the hundreds into the low thousands, depending upon the value of the home.
Makes sense.
And also, the premium is paid once, so you don't pay it on an annual basis like property insurance. You pay it at the time you take out the policy.
That's it.
So it's not
Yeah.
an ongoing expense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's worth every penny. I know you've explained it to us in the past. I mean, we never thought like something like this could happen. It was more kind of thinking of in the past, like did they take out the proper permits, etc.
Right.
But now this is an even bigger a bigger issue in my opinion. Right, someone selling the house from under you, and in terms of like for us realtors, right? Like, what would be your recommendation? Like, how can we protect our clients, from this kind of fraud? Like, is there any advice that you might have for us?
Well, I think as an agent representing sellers, it's very important that when you do your know your client, meet your know your client obligations in terms of ID verification, things like that, you use the best tools available to you to do that, so that you know that the person you're dealing with is the person you think you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I think that's key. If you're acting for a buyer,
Mm-hmm.
again, it's a little trickier because, as I said before, you're not dealing directly with the sellers, right? You're dealing through
Mm-hmm.
an intermediary, unless you're representing both sides. In which case, the same thing applies as when you're acting for a seller. But I think the key is know your client. Really know that the person you're dealing with is the person who is the proper registered owner of the property.
Okay.
Whatever steps you can take to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, our obligation is to verify one piece of identification, right, with the seller, in person, or if it's virtually, it can be done as well. But is there, maybe doing two IDs? Is there any other
Yeah,
steps that can be taken, like any other?
sure. I'll tell you what I've started doing in my own practice because the Law Society, the regulatory body for lawyers, has similar requirements of us.
Okay.
One piece of ID traditionally. They've been talking recently about increasing that to two pieces. I've started doing two pieces of ID. A lot of the lenders require that already, that we get two pieces of
Okay.
ID anyway. And also, I'm using a platform for ID verification,
Okay.
which is not, they check both, the ID and then also other badges of fraud. So they'll check against the credit bureau. They don't pull a credit bureau, but they do check against a credit bureau. And if they
Okay.
see changes of address recently, like multiple changes, things like that are flags, they draw it to your attention. So
Okay.
it adds a
Interesting.
layer of scrutiny beyond what I can do merely by looking at a piece of ID and holding it up against their face and saying, okay, and that's the address. Okay, I'm not an expert. I'm not a forensic expert. I can't
Of
tell
course. Yeah.
if a piece of plastic is real or made in some ordered off the dark web or who knows what.
Of course.
So deferring to someone else who's an expert in the field. And there's lots of providers. I happen to work with one that's partnered with one of the title insurers in Canada, so that I know that it lines up with what their requirements are. So it makes it that much easier to ensure that the requirements of the lender and the title insurer are met as well.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah,
That's
I'm not going to
fantastic.
plug brands, but yeah, there's many out there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, definitely. Like, well, I'll get the name from you after, and
Sure.
we can share with our fellow realtors here at Remax Hallmark. We like to be, we like to be at the forefront of, protecting our clients and the industry in general. So I think it would be fantastic. It's never been. We always identify clients. FinTrack requires us to even take ongoing courses and updates, and but to protect from this level of fraud, I mean, it's obviously something very elaborate. I think a program like that actually verifies the ID, not just me looking at a piece of plastic, I think would be fantastic. One last question, Mitch,
Yeah.
before I let you go, is like in these particular cases, you have the agent that got fooled, you have the mortgage broker and the lawyer. Like, who do you, I mean, not to try and point a finger here, but like, who do you think, who's the gatekeeper here? Like, who should have kind of like, okay, like, who dropped the ball?
Probably everyone. If this happened in transactions back in late 21, early 22,
Hmm.
and in Toronto, where the market was particularly crazy, and I'm willing to bet that it was a really quick closing.
Yeah.
And they target busy offices, busy realtors' offices, busy lawyers' offices, where maybe they have to put a little faith in, the last guy that touched the file. Say, okay, I'm sure it's okay because this person said it's okay, and everyone has to kind of rely on that because it's all go go go. That maybe everyone shares the blame,
Yeah.
right? We just,
Makes sense.
yeah,
Makes
now we
sense.
have the luxury. Unfortunately, we have the luxury of spending a little more time
A
on the
little bit more
file,
time. Yeah. 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 No,
right? Here we are in early 2023. It's a little bit different, but
that's it.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think there are sophisticated criminals that know who to target, and you know, unfortunately, everyone gets caught. And thankfully, everyone has their own errors and omissions insurance. And so,
Of
if this
course.
is not something that title insurance is going to cover, uh, hopefully there will be someone with a fund available for recourse.
To recourse for the buyer or seller. No, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
exactly.
Mitch, I really appreciate you coming on with us. I know you have a crazy busy schedule, but no, this is fantastic information. I think a lot of our audience will be very pleased to hear all the breakdown and the different protection options that they have. So thank you so much, Mitch.
My
Thank you,
pleasure.
like always, for always being there for us and for our clients. And Happy New Year.
Well, thank you, and happy New Year to you and to your viewers.
Thank you so much. Bye,
Thank you.
Mitchell Leitman at RSR, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.